You're finished, old man. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the board. You are done in this community. That, right there, was the soundtrack to my Tuesday morning. The sound of pure, unadulterated HOA fury, delivered by Vivian Sterling, the self-proclaimed queen of Laurel Creek Estates. She was screeching, spitting fury into the quiet air, standing right in the middle of our street like a kettle left boiling too long. And what was causing this operatic meltdown? Her gorgeous, obsidian-black Maserati Gran Turismo, now resting perfectly still on a set of bright red jack stands, stripped bare like a luxury lobster dinner. The massive alloy wheels were stacked neatly against my newly repaired mailbox. The carbon fiber mirrors, removed with surgical precision, sat wrapped in microfiber towels beside the garage door. The custom windshield, leaning safely against the old oak tree my wife, Sarah, used to love. Not a single scratch, just perfectly, legally, disassembled piece by piece. Vivian stomped her cashmere-clad foot, flailed her manicured hands, while neighbors, quiet, decent people, slowly gathered with their mugs of coffee, pretending they weren't absolutely, utterly enjoying every single second. And me? I just leaned against my porch railing, took a long, slow sip of my coffee, and smiled. "Morning, Vivian," I said. "Looks like your parking privileges expired." How did we get from her blocking my access every morning to me turning her $500,000 sports car into a museum exhibit of mechanical deconstruction, all without breaking a single law? Well, stick around, because this one, folks, is for the history books. But first, if you've ever had to deal with a bully who thinks a clipboard makes them God's personal traffic warden, hit subscribe. You and I, we're family now. Life here, in Laurel Creek, used to be simple. I moved into this neighborhood 30 years ago with Sarah. She loved the silence, the way the ancient pines filtered the sunlight, and she loved this house, a modest brick ranch with a simple 2-car driveway. It was the last major project we ever completed together, those perfect, hand-laid cobblestones in the driveway. She insisted on them because, as she put it, asphalt looks sad, George. This is our happy place. After she passed, I kept everything exactly as she left it. The rose bushes she planted near the curb, I pruned them religiously. The old wrought iron bird feeder, still standing in the same sunny corner. And that driveway, I maintained those stones like sacred ground. To anyone else, it's just pavement. To me, it's the last project we ever shared. So, when someone disrespects that space, well, let's just say I take it personally. For 2 decades, the HOA here was harmless. Mostly retired teachers and decent folks trying to keep the hedges trimmed. Then they elected Vivian Sterling. I remember the day I first saw her, stepping out of that glossy black Maserati like she was arriving at the Met Gala, not a neighborhood meeting. She wore sunglasses bigger than my hands, heels too high for asphalt, and a permanent expression of barely concealed disappointment. Every word she spoke had the tone of someone who should be running a Fortune 500 company, not an association of 32 suburban homes. At first, I didn't worry. People like that, they burn hot and flame out quick. Or so I thought. Then the letter started. It began with a thin, white envelope taped to my door. I'd been restoring a vintage Ford F-100 inside my garage, but one afternoon, I'd rolled it half out, still on my own driveway, just to get some breathing room. Not blocking the sidewalk, not illegal, just half out. That was enough for Vivian. "You are in violation of HOA Rule 17C, the letter screamed, prohibiting partial garage overflow or unsightly automotive work visible from the street. Unsightly automotive work. She called my beautiful 56 Ford junk. I shrugged it off. People like her need to feel important. But the letters kept coming. My recycling bin was visible from certain angles. My porch light was too yellow. My lawn had inconsistent color saturation. I swear, I'm not exaggerating any of this. Still, I stayed polite, quiet, reasonable, because that's who I am. Everything changed on a warm Thursday morning in early September. I walked outside with my coffee, ready to head to my shop. And there it was, her Maserati, sitting directly in front of my house. Not in front of hers, not in a guest spot. No, she had pulled up just close enough to the edge of my cobblestone driveway that backing out required a complicated 3-point maneuver, the kind of thing you only do if you're actively trying to be a jerk. I stared at it for a long 10 seconds. Her own curb was open. Her massive, 3-car driveway was empty. The guest parking was 50 feet down. No reason. Zero. I sighed, walked across the street, and knocked politely. Vivian opened the door in expensive-looking athleisure, holding a kale smoothie the color of radioactive waste. Yes? She asked, with that tone that implied I'd just interrupted a national security briefing. Morning, Vivian, I said, keeping my voice calm. I think you parked a little close to my driveway. Could you shift the car back a few feet? She didn't even blink. Utterly unimpressed. That's common area parking, George. Perfectly legal. I'm not saying it's illegal, I replied. I'm saying it's obstructing access to my private property. She gave me that slow, contemptuous shrug, the one that tells you exactly what she thinks of your existence. You'll manage, she said, and simply shut the door. Not an apology, not a promise to move it. Just a cold, deliberate dismissal. My jaw tightened, but I let it go. One time isn't a pattern. Maybe she had a bad day. But the next morning, it was there again. Same spot, same angle, same unnecessary inconvenience. On day 3, I knocked again, still believing in the faint hope of human decency. This time, her voice floated through the intercom. It's legal parking, George. Don't bother me again. I stood there in the haze, staring at her stupid camera lens, and that was the moment it clicked. This wasn't laziness. This wasn't coincidence. This was a power play, a message, a psychological turf war. And she was telling me, very clearly, that she made the rules, that she could inconvenience me anytime, that she was untouchable, and I was just another homeowner she could boss around. And if you've ever dealt with a textbook Karen, you know the smug satisfaction they get from petty dominance. But here's the thing about me. I may be quiet. I may be old. I may be patient. But I'm not weak. And you do not push me into a corner. Especially not in front of my house. Especially not in front of Sarah's driveway. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger. Anger is too messy, too loud. What I felt was clarity. A cold, precise sense of purpose. If Vivian wanted a battle over parking courtesy and boundaries, I was going to give her one. And I was going to win it the one way she'd never, ever expect. Not with shouting. Not with HOA politics. But with the one thing I've mastered better than anyone else in this world. Tools, logic, and mechanical perfection. She had just parked her Maserati in front of the wrong house, and she had no idea what was coming. For the next, see, George, even the police said I'm not doing anything wrong. Maybe you should try being more neighborly. I didn't respond. Her arrogance wasn't the important part. The important part was the officer's advice. Document everything. Over the next week, I took photos every single morning. I logged times. I recorded brief videos showing how close she parked and how difficult it was to leave safely. I printed each picture, labeled it, and stored it all in a 3-ring binder, the legendary blue binder. Neighbors began whispering encouragement. Old Mrs. Clara, the retired teacher, would whisper, "Get her, George. She fined me for having the wrong color mulch." But nobody wanted to be public about it. Vivian had burned too many people already. One morning, after my tow truck attempt failed, she scared the driver off with threats of a lawsuit. I stood there, fists clenched. Not in rage, but in realization. I couldn't win playing her game. She had the HOA under her thumb. She could bully tow drivers. She could twist reality in front of the police. But there was one battlefield she couldn't control, the law. Real law. Not her twisted HOA interpretation of it. That night, I pulled out every document I had. Bylaws, covenants, city municipal codes, state property statutes. I sat at my dining table, highlighter in hand, reading glasses perched on my nose, with a pot of black coffee strong enough to fuel a tractor. Hours passed. Then it happened. I found it. A city ordinance about repeated obstruction of access. A state statute about persistent nuisances caused by improperly parked vehicles. And a crucial HOA rule about a property owner's right to remove or abate an ongoing nuisance. The wording was vague, beautifully vague. Nowhere did it specify how the nuisance had to be abated. My mind clicked like a well-tuned engine purring to life. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she could bully everyone with her title. But she didn't actually understand the laws she waved around. I've always believed a man's greatest strength isn't his fists, it's his patience. Patience builds engines. Patience restores classic cars. Patience turns an old man with a wrench into the only line of defense between chaos and craftsmanship. So, for the next few days, I did nothing that Vivian could interpret as retaliation. I let her fall back into the rhythm of entitlement. At 7:10 a.m. every morning, her Maserati slid into place like clockwork, arrogantly angled. I let her think she'd won. Take away the resistance, and people like her get sloppy. While she was busy admiring herself in the HOA clubhouse windows, I was busy setting up my operation. My garage, usually the birthplace of polished Fords, became a war room. I spread out the city codes, the bylaws, the highlighted statutes. I was building a legal cathedral. And then, I drafted the most important weapon of all. A letter. Not a scrap of paper, but a formal, legally formatted, meticulously referenced document. It cited Municipal Code 6.41 subsection C. Property owners may abate ongoing nuisances obstructing access or safety. It cited HOA bylaw 4.7. No resident shall repeatedly utilize shared or public space to harass or target another resident. And the final line, my personal favorite. Failure to cease obstruction may result in removal, relocation, or partial disassembly of said vehicle as allowed by law. This letter serves as the final notice. I printed 2 copies. One was mailed via certified mail, signature required, proving she received it. The other, I laminated and sealed in my blue binder. On Friday afternoon, I watched from my window as the postal worker knocked on her door. I watched Vivian sign for the letter with a bored flick of her wrist. Good. Let her be bored. Because ignoring it was the final, bright green light I needed. Monday arrived. At 7:23 a.m., I heard the sound, that low, aggressive purr of a tuned German engine. I lifted my blinds a crack, and there she was. Vivian pulled up, slowed to a crawl, and parked her Maserati deliberately, theatrically, half an inch closer to my driveway than ever before. She stepped out slowly, adjusted her sunglasses, and then she turned and stared directly at my window. A challenge, a taunt, a sneering declaration of war. Then she walked off. I smiled. The smile of a man who has just been handed exactly the mistake he was waiting for. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited. Waited until every house went dark. Waited until the cicadas were the only witnesses awake. At 2:14 a.m., when the world was silent, I opened my garage. The soft sound of my rolling toolbox echoed like a war drum. This wasn't revenge. This was engineering. This was justice by way of grease and torque. This was years of mechanical experience finally finding a very deserving canvas. I approached her car, placed my hand on the hood, and whispered, "Let's get started." There's something sacred about a neighborhood at 2 a.m. The world is paused. Perfect. I slid the floor jack under the frame, located the factory lift points. I wasn't about to make mistakes. This needed to be perfect. With slow, deliberate pumps, the front of the Maserati rose. The soft groan of metal was a lullaby to my mechanic's heart. Once the jack stands were in place, solid, stable, I started on the wheels. My impact wrench isn't one of those loud, obnoxious things. I modified it myself. It purred with a soft, controlled buzz, a whisper of power. The lug nuts spun off like they'd been waiting all week. All 4 massive alloy wheels came off. I set each one on a padded blanket by my garage wall, arranging them in a neat row like expensive pieces of art. Next, the battery. Then the mirrors. Not many people know this, but Maserati side mirrors are attached with a series of hidden bolts and a locking clip that requires a special tool. Lucky for me, I had that tool. Pop, slide, twist, lift. Both mirrors came off smoothly, wrapped immediately in microfiber towels. The final boss, the windshield. Modern windshields are bonded with urethane adhesive. Removing one without shattering it is an art. It takes a flexible blade, a heat gun, and the steady hands of a surgeon. I'd done it dozens of times. Slowly, slicing through the adhesive, bit by bit. 22 minutes later, the windshield broke free with a soft sigh. I carried it over to the side of my house like it was an ancient, fragile artifact. Not a single crack. Always perfect. At this point, the Maserati looked like a high-end sculpture, stripped hollow, sitting on steel stands. But everything was intact. Reversible. Legal. A removable nuisance. Nothing more. I cleaned up every tool, wiped down the cobblestones because I am that level of tidy, and stood back to admire my work. This wasn't destruction. This was order. I took one final photo from my binder and went inside. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, sat in my armchair, and watched the sky turn a soft gold. I knew this was going to be a hell of a morning. At exactly 7:18 a.m., Vivian's front door flew open. She stepped out in a silk robe, clutching a thermos. She strutted toward her car, then froze. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Her brain was buffering, loading the nightmare pixel by pixel. Then came the sound. A high-pitched, animalistic shriek that echoed through Laurel Creek. "Oh my God! What did you do? What did you do to my car?" Her voice cracked like broken glass. Neighbors stepped onto porches. Curtains fluttered open. Camera phones quietly recorded. I stepped outside slowly, sipping my coffee like this was any normal Tuesday. "Morning, Vivian," I said calmly. "Looks like you're missing a few parts. Everything is safe. Wheels, mirrors, windshield, all over by my garage. You're welcome to pick them up anytime." "You psycho. You destroyed it. You destroyed my Maserati." "Destroyed?" "No," I replied, tilting my head politely. "Your vehicle was a repeated obstruction. I warned you. In writing, certified mail, legal citations included. I even laminated a copy if you'd like it." That's when she screamed the legendary sentence that would become our neighborhood's favorite catchphrase. "You're finished. I'm calling the board. I'm calling the police. You're done, old man." I smiled. The same two officers showed up, the polite young guy and the stern woman with the neat bun. They took in the sight of the skeletal Maserati carcass on jack stands. The female officer raised an eyebrow at me. "Mr. Jones?" "With pleasure, officer," I said. I calmly presented the blue binder, the time-stamped photos, and the laminated letter complete with the certified mail receipt showing Vivian Sterling's signature. The officer flipped through the evidence. Her expression went from shocked to impressed, then to something dangerously close to, "Ma'am, you have officially messed with the wrong person." Then she delivered the verdict. "Ma'am," the officer said coolly, "based on the documentation, Mr. Jones issued multiple, legally formatted warnings. He has removed parts of your vehicle without causing damage. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. We cannot arrest him." Vivian's lower lip trembled. "What do you mean you can't arrest him? Look at my car." "I see your car, ma'am," the officer said evenly. "But every action taken was reversible and documented. He acted within his rights under property abatement statutes." Behind them, 3 neighbors snorted loudly. Another nearly dropped his coffee. Eleanor had spent years lording over everyone with her HOA crown, and now she was powerless. The officers left soon after with a final piece of wisdom for her. "We suggest resolving this civilly." When the cruiser pulled away, Vivian spun around, eyes blazing. "You think this is over, George? You think you've won?" I took a final sip of coffee. "I think, Vivian, your parking privileges have expired." 3 days later, I received a letter. A very thick letter, embossed with the name law offices of Burton and Stevens, representing Vivian Sterling. A lawsuit for $500,000 claiming property destruction, emotional distress, and my favorite, deprivation of personal transportation, critical to HOA president duties. I nearly choked on my tea. I called my nephew, who works at a big downtown firm. He referred me to attorney Lydia Grant. Lydia was razor-sharp, quiet, and had the energy of someone who eats entitled people for breakfast. She skimmed the lawsuit, then opened my blue binder. "Mr. Jones," she said, looking up with a genuine grin. "This is the most beautifully organized neighbor dispute file I've ever seen. You didn't just cover your bases, you built a cathedral on them." She continued, "We're not just going..." She subpoenaed HOA communications, requested meeting minutes, and demanded they release financial records. That's when the real secrets came out. Turns out, Vivian had been waiving her own HOA fines, using funds for executive expenses, and issuing citations without